Hi, Dwayne Duggan, Remax of Boulder podcast. Today we have Jon Goodman here. Jon, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Dwayne.
Jon is an attorney with Frascona, Joyner, Goodman, and Greenstein.
Very good, Dwayne.
That's a lot of names there. I try to get that right. I practiced that very hard. So I appreciate you being here and appreciate your years of wisdom in the Boulder area real estate market. So today we're going to talk about something that's kind of on the rise right now, and that's wire fraud relative to real estate transactions. So, Jon, kick us off with an example of wire fraud. What's going on out there in the world?
Well, what we're talking about today, an example of what we're talking about today is you are headed towards a closing. Let's say you're the buyer and you need to know where to wire the money to. You happen to get an email and the email tells you where to wire the money to. The email has logo that makes it look like it's the reputable title company that your reputable real estate broker has hired. You follow the instructions and you might be wiring a significant sum of money. You know, a 20% down payment might be $100,000 depending on what market you're in. And lo and behold, that email that came to you was from a fraudster and you wired that money to the wrong place.
Wow. That's pretty scary when you think about it. Maybe we'll go back to cashier's checks someday. Of course, I guess that can be a problem in and of itself too right now. Huh?
It can be, but the wiring thing is more instantaneous.
Yeah, so somebody can empty their bank account, never see it again instantly. That's so scary. It's unbelievable.
Yes.
So what is wire fraud in general?
Well, one of the things, and I mention this because some of you who are watching this video might be inclined to do other searching about it. If you Google the term wire fraud is this very broad term that essentially refers to any fraud that's committed over state lines, over any kind of wire, like a telephone wire. And my understanding is that the wire fraud statute was created in the 1800s. Well, they weren't talking about the internet then. They were probably talking about the telegraph then. So if you search wire fraud, you'll find out about a lot of other kinds of fraud. I mean, if somebody is trying to sell me a hair replacement medicine that's fraudulent and doesn't work over state lines, that could be wire fraud too.
Wow, interesting.
What we're technically talking about, and forgive me, I am a nerdy lawyer, what we are technically talking about is what I would call wiring fraud. But we will keep calling it wire fraud.
Gotcha. So what can people do to protect themselves against this?
One of the things you can do is make sure that when you do wire money, you control the source of the wire instructions. In other words, imagine yourself, you get off of a bus, a train, or a taxi, and you're walking around the bus station and somebody walks up to you and says, "Would you like a ride?" That is a suspicious proposal to you. That is not some random person. That is some person seeking you out. It's very different if you go outside and walk into a line where there's a bunch of taxis loaded up. If you hire the taxi yourself, the person you're hiring could be a bad actor, but it's much less likely than somebody who finds you. Right. So the first thing is, make sure you're the one who's reaching out. You can control whether you're reaching out to a source of the wiring instructions that seems somewhat credible. Okay. So an example would be, instead of going to a website and trying to find the phone number of the closer, because remember, that website could be faked. Call Dwayne. Call somebody whose voice you recognize in the transaction, and let Dwayne not give it to you via email, because the email could be faked, the email could be hacked, but have Dwayne give it to you verbally, for example. Right. Or have Dwayne won't give it to you verbally. What Dwayne will do, though, is Dwayne will give you the phone number for the closer, and then that closer will give you the wire instructions.
So it's interesting, some of the stories I've heard where somebody calls up for a closer and the call has been rerouted and gets told, well, the closer had to go to the hospital, their child is sick, and they set it up so smart. It's unbelievable how you can be faked out at this.
Well, I think I'm aware of the situation that you just described, but that was also following up on an email that came from the fraudsters.
Right.
If somebody whose voice you recognize gives you the phone number, then it's extraordinarily likely that at least you're calling the true title company involved in the transaction.
Right. Well, I think it's important too for both buyers and sellers to know who the players are and get to know them early in the transaction just so that when it comes time for wiring instructions, they do know who the players are, their voices, and what's reputable and what's not. So.
Yes. Do you want another tip?
I would love to have another tip.
Okay. Another idea to decrease the likelihood of wire fraud is to remember the movie The Sting. Now, Dwayne and I are old enough to remember the movie The Sting.
There you go.
And in the movie The Sting, by the way, it was Robert Redford and
somebody else. We can't
Paul Newman, who were sort of like the Brad Pitt and George Clooney of the day. But what happened in this movie is they when they were trying to fake people out, they would have to like fake a horse track betting scene, or they would have to fake a Union Station scene. Well, you just got to remember that in the modern era, when we're so not oriented to brick and mortars, fraudsters don't have to fake a title company anymore.
Right.
They can just create a website, or they can create logo and emails and send it to you. Don't be lulled into a false sense of security by getting emails or going to a website that appears to be bona fide. Control the source. You seek out the wiring instructions in a way that's relevant rather than allowing other people to find you.
Perfect. Any other tips?
Well, the only other tip is to keep your thinking cap on and be careful. It's a lot of money.
And I think this could be a good one to follow up on as things progress as far as fighting against it, that we can share tips that we come up with for future viewings. So,
I would love to do that.
All right. John, thank you for being here.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Dwayne.
your wisdom. Dwayne Duggan, Remax and Boulder Podcast, signing off.